Welcome to the Jamie Renda podcast, sponsored today by Brixton's Baked Potato and the Trump Tater. Our guest today is Malik Dayo.
Yes.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, Malik organized the protest in Ogden last week for the Black Lives Matter.
That is correct.
And can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what caused you to get involved in sponsoring or helping organize some of these protests?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I want to go ahead and clarify, I'm not speaking today on behalf of Black Lives Matter in any type of official capacity. It's more, whatever I say today are my views as a community activist and my personal experiences. And I don't speak for all left-leaning people. These are my views through the work that I've done over the years.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
So what led you to get involved?
So what led me to get involved? I would say once just like most everybody else, once we started seeing more killing of unarmed black men by police and other men as well too, and women, children as well, it kind of created a little spark in me. Now, I used to participate in protests in Phoenix before I moved back to Utah. They had the SB 1070 there, which was a law that they passed for law enforcement to be able to ask people their citizenship based on what they look like. Okay. And I wasn't an organizer, but I was a participator. And when I came to Ogden, I seen nobody was doing anything. So I decided to start organizing during the Hands Up, Don't Shoot movement. And I Can't Breathe movement is when I became very involved.
Okay. Now, before we kind of get into the protest that was held last Saturday, I want to just mention, because we're kind of, people might see us that we're on opposite sides of the issue, which I don't think we are, and I think having the dialogue and realizing what common ground that a lot of Americans have is really important to have. As you know, I own Brixton's Baked Potato up the street.
Yes,
and,
I do know that.
So April would have been our 10-year anniversary that we were there, and like the rest of restaurants, we were severely impacted with this coronavirus shutdown, and so I couldn't have my 10-year anniversary. So I thought at that time that I would put a banner up supporting our president during this time of crisis. So I put this big banner that says, "We love and support our president." And I also have a little character, because it's a baked potato shop, called the Trump Tater. And I've had this Trump Tater in my store for about 2 years, and just kind of having a little fun with politics and potatoes. But I've received a lot of hate from having that sign up. And people calling me a racist and a lot of derogatory things, people harassing my staff, and they really don't know anything about me. And yet they feel quite free to call me things that they don't really understand where I'm at on issues. So in the conversation today, not right now, we're going to start with the protest, and I'd like to kind of get in and talk about maybe some things that we don't always know about people before we make judgments. And I think all of us do it, and I think we ought to be more careful on that.
Yes, we all have biases, correct.
Yeah. So anyway, I want to first just tell you what an awesome job that you did.
Thank you.
At the rally.
I appreciate it.
And I think you made Ogden proud. And I think we've been a shining light for a lot of the rest of Utah and the world on how people came together and class act after you went up and shook the policeman's hand.
Correct.
And told them thank you for their service. And so tell me a little bit about the rally and why and how you conducted it the way you did.
Well, the rally, as you already know, was done just a few days after the shooting happened with George Floyd. And when things happen like this, and you're involved in community activism, you really have to strike while the iron's hot. And the reason why I say that is because the news that just passes by every day, because just 1 minute this is important, the next minute it's forgotten about, and then they move on to something else, like some Hollywood scandal or something, right? So we have to strike while the iron's hot. We have to bring awareness now. It was a difficult choice to make because, like you said, we had just lost one of our officers, right? And I live here in Ogden too, so he was my officer as well, right? So very important that be known. You know, it's not an anti-policing movement that we're involved in. What we wanted to do was pay homage to the life and memory of George Floyd. We wanted to stand in unity and solidarity with the people in Minneapolis And we wanted to show that, hey, Ogden cares too. You know, Ogden's here for you too. We might be in some Mormon state thousands of miles away, but we hear your cries. We're here with you. We're suffering with you. And we were going to pull out of this. Well, I was going to make the decision to pull out of this several times. At least 7 times I was going to back out, just because of us currently, you know, or recently losing an officer. Also with just the high tensions all over the country with, you know, fires and stuff like that. And cities, you know, getting destroyed and property being damaged. You know, there was just a lot to take into consideration, and just the safety of everybody there, right? So I got a little bit of pushback from the organizers, because there were some threats that white supremacists were going to show up as well and disrupt our protest. And they said, hey, you know, we can't let them win. You know, we got this, you know. And between all of us there, we had over 100 years of combined community activism experience and organizing. So we felt pretty confident that we would be able to have a safe protest. And I also coordinated with the police and kind of went back and forth a little bit with them whether we should do it or not. And I pretty much let them know that we were going to go ahead and do it. I promised them that we would respect them at that protest, that we would not speak badly of them, that we respect their time of mourning, and they assured me that they would allow us to protest and voice our rights.
Awesome. Well, it turned out to be a beautiful day, and
Yes.
it certainly put a beautiful light on Ogden.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your great efforts there. You mentioned the other day we met together once before
Yeah.
we had this podcast just
Yeah.
to get to know each other.
Yeah.
And you mentioned when you were growing up that the police would patrol neighborhoods and have almost like a relationship building opportunity with young people in the neighborhoods. How
Oh,
do you
yeah.
feel like that impacted you, and do you feel like it would be helpful to do that today?
It'd most definitely be helpful. For people who are from Ogden, I grew up on 17th and Lincoln. We all know that's not the best street to be on at night, right? But that's exactly where I grew up, right smack dab in the middle. And I still have family that lives there today. And back in those days when us teenagers would get in trouble, the police would come. I would know Officer Hightower. He was a African-American officer. And he knew my grandfather also, because he was half Puerto Rican, and I come from a Puerto Rican family. So he knew my mom. He knew us by name. I knew Steve Rankin. He was a very good friend of mine at that time as I was growing up. I knew Randy Watt as a teenager. He was one of the instructors at the Kung Fu studio on 15th and Washington, and I remember him back then giving us classes as teenagers. So I knew the police in my community. I wasn't scared of them. If something happened, they knew, they knew who we were. They knew who we were related to. They'd be like, oh, you're related to the Martinezes, or you're related to, Steve, or you're related to, you know what I mean? And that don't exist anymore. That's gone, that's out the door. And that's unfortunate, because now we have officers in our communities that aren't from our communities. They don't live here, they don't look like us, and it's almost like an occupying force here. When it's like that, when you throw community policing out the door. A cop drives by now, I mean, they know who I am, of course, but I have no clue who they are.
Do you feel like it would be well received on the community's end if something like that started? How would you go about creating that type of policing again?
I would like it. I'm going to give you an example. These young teenagers had a protest the other night, okay? And OPD was out there, which I'm glad they were. And I went there to disperse the protest, because they were going to have a protest at 8:30 at night. And with all the fires that were happening in Salt Lake City, I didn't want to risk anything here in Ogden, because they were just young, inexperienced protesters, probably their first protest they had ever made, possibly. I'm not sure of that. However, I went there to, speak with them. I didn't go to disperse it. I went to speak to them to let them know, hey, there's dangers in this. There's a lot of planning involved in organizing. You got to make sure you have some type of security set up. You got to make sure you have first aid people there. You got to make sure you have plenty of water. You got to make sure people are safe, and they got the picture, and they said, hey, you know what? you're right. And now they want to be part of Black Lives Matter, which is very cool. So it was very productive to go down there and speak with them. And then afterwards, I spoke to the police officers who were outside, and I told them, hey, I'm just going to stand out here for a minute, 5-10 minutes, and just tell people that the protest has been canceled. And I told a couple of people who were walking by, hey, protest canceled. Sorry about that. Yeah, just for safety, it's getting dark. And so on and so forth. And then, you know, they looked at me and they said, we got this, Malik. Community policing for me would have been like, all right, Malik, hang out, man. We'll be here if you need me.
Yeah. And kind of do it
And what
together.
ended up happening? Dozens of protesters showed up afterwards after I left.
Yeah. So I don't know which feed it was, but I even got a feed that had people talking about the protest that was happening and had some responses from you in it, and back and forth. And my son even had some on his. So I called Kevin and I said, Kevin, go check out what's going on down there. So he came down and he took some pictures. But so that communication is really important, because
Yes.
where you could probably, having that connection, cool things down. Right now, we also have a problem with a great amount of disrespect for the police force, and calling them names, and so we got to find a way to both get the police back into the community and some respect going back from our youth and others to the police. So, but I think it can be done. But I think it starts with communication.
It starts also with not having fear. Now, if anybody follows my Facebook, they'll see this, and I knew it come from. I know it came from a good place, so I don't want nobody to misinterpret what I'm going to say. But there was an officer who had mentioned that he was at the protest, a white officer, and that he was kind of scared to be there and in a crowd with people of color because he just didn't know what could happen, and that, I'm just paraphrasing this, and that they welcomed him in and made space for him and stuff like that, and that he felt at home. Beautiful story, right? I read between the lines. I only have one problem with the story when he said he was scared to be among us, right? Because that same fear is what gets black people killed every day.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. But, but I'm glad that the protest was, even if it didn't accomplish anything that day, if it just accomplished making that cop feel more comfortable around black and brown people, then that whole protest was worth it.
Well, I think you mentioned fear.
Yeah.
And right now, we live in a lot of fear.
Oh, yeah, on both sides.
Well, not just fear. I mean, we have the fear of the coronavirus. We have the fear of jobs. We have the fear of financial security. Now we have the fear of these racial tensions. That's really hard. I mean, fear is really detrimental. And so we've got to find a way not to live in fear, but to, to have trust in each other and to have faith that things are going to work out. I mean, so, but fear is not good.
No, it's not good.
on either side,
No.
fear is not good.
No.
So I want to talk just briefly about some of the causes I've been involved in to just let you know prison reform has been a big issue for me for a long time. I have worked with legislators and Kevin, people who don't know, Kevin's the one that videotapes these podcasts, and we want to thank Kevin Johnson Media for this. Knows I've had people on, and every person I have on, I talk to him about prison reform. Where do you stand on prison reform and why prison reform is important? And the First Step Act happened on a national level, but we have a lot of work to do on a state level.
Oh, yeah.
The First Step Act doesn't impact our state prison system.
Correct.
So again, this has been long time effort on trying to lobby our legislators, and it's not easy. I mean, it's not discounting protests, but protests for other than people like the organizers. You show up and you protest and you go home. But when you're working on a sustained effort to change laws, it's a lot of work.
Oh, but when we go home, let me stop right there really quick.
No, I don't mean the people who organize. I'm talking about the people who
just the people who show up.
The people
Yeah,
that
okay,
just
got
show
you.
up. Okay, no. I know someone like yourself is doing the same thing I'm doing.
Yes, correct. Okay,
but
got you.
sometimes people feel that the protest itself, it brings awareness, but a lot of the real work is building those relationships.
Yes.
And changing people's hearts and putting together the right legislation and getting it passed.
That's a lot right there, yeah.
It's a lot of work.
It is.
And it takes a lot of persuasion, a lot of making people aware, education.
And I'm thankful that you've worked on prison reform because I'm very for prison and jail reform. If you followed any of my stuff, I was a very staunch advocate for the family of Marian Herrera, who was a Latinx woman who died in the Weber County Jail of dehydration. Justice for Marian. So unless we do have some serious jail reform and prison reform, things like Marian Herrera and other people, it's going to continue to happen, and it could possibly spark more problems, within our society.
Good. We also talked briefly yesterday, and we're both kind of on the same feeling of pro-life, that we value, or I don't want to put words into your mouth, I'm just going by our conversation, that we both have some similar background that we feel we're pro-life.
Yeah, and let me clarify that for my audience before they start making a lot of bad comments, right? So I am pro-life, but I am not anti-abortion, okay? I believe it's every woman's right to choose what they want to do with their bodies. As a man, I should basically shut up on those issues, really. I shouldn't really be here making comments on those tonight. It's not my place. That's a woman's conversation. But personally, yes, I am pro-life, but I am not against anybody who takes the pro-choice side, and I support their beliefs, although they're not my own.
Well, the reason I bring this up is because as a conservative, a lot of conservatives are pro-life. And so I see prison reform as a pro-life issue.
Oh yeah, on a different level, yeah.
It's on a different level, that we should value the life of those who are spending the rest of their life or a significant portion of their life in prison. And if we can reform someone and give them the skills that they need to come out and be a contributing citizen and be able to bless the lives of their family by being out of prison, we should do everything we can.
Exactly, and we also, and we have to stop that pipeline that's getting people in there in the first place.
Exactly. So there's a lot of things. I think, one, we've incentivized our prison system to house people, and we need to incentivize our, I don't even know if I want to use the word prison system, but reform system to reform. And so even may have different categories of prisons where somebody who's a low-level offender, you don't want to put them in prison because that ends up causing them to come out probably a high-level offender at one time. So there's...
Yeah, like people who get busted for marijuana.
Yeah. So anyway, we've really got to reevaluate how do we reform our system, our judicial system, that we can give people second chances in life, and real second chances. And so anyway, that's just, we need a lot of dialogue on that, because a lot of private prison systems have been criticized. We shouldn't do private prison systems. Personally, I don't think the government does anything well. So I'm not against private prison systems, but I'm against the incentive that we've given private prison systems.
Now, are you saying the government doesn't do anything well, or just...
Not anything well within a budget, I think.
Okay, we could agree there on the budget.
Okay, so I think economically, if we give the right incentives to private prison systems, that they could probably be more affordable.
I think we need to eliminate the private prison systems because they're profiting off of black and brown bodies.
Okay, see, that's the problem, is we've made it where it's a profit system.
Yes.
But if we made it where it's based on reform and the recidivism rate goes down, we need to change the motivation that these prison systems have.
We definitely, we have to change the motivation. I'll agree with you there, but I'm still against private prisons because they don't have their place in our society. People shouldn't profit and be able to take vacations while they have a business of people who are locked up.
Well, and it's serious reform. But and I don't know. I don't care if it's government, if it's the government ran or private. We need to change the what the motivation is. We have to change the motivation. I agree with you. So we have to make it.
Because if you take money out of it, there won't be no private prisons.
Possibly. There's a lot of good organizations.
How are they going to stay open?
There's a lot of good nonprofits that run with. I think you can.
That would keep a prison open?
Yeah, I think you could.
I would not want to be part of that nonprofit. I think we need to lessen the amount of jails and prisons that we have.
I agree with that.
So then we don't need private prisons then.
Well, that's another topic.
Yeah, for another day. Okay, I'll say to you.
Okay.
We'll say that for another program.
Because there's a lot of discussion that needs to go in on that.
I agree.
And so, but that is something that we need to bring everybody at the table.
Yeah.
And find some unique ways to experiment.
Yes,
and
definitely.
find out what works.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one of the big issues that got me involved, and I'm passionate about the cause that you were rallying on the other day, is I lived in South Carolina, and I moved there in 1997, and my husband was military. And at that time, the Confederate battle flag flew on the State House dome and in the House and Senate chambers.
What year was this again?
1997.
Okay. And what was the reason?
Oh, my husband was military.
Okay.
So I was in South Carolina.
No, what was the reason for the flag being?
Oh, no, they'd been there. They flew in official capacity on the dome and in the House and Senate chambers.
Okay, gotcha.
So David Beasley, a Republican, was running for re-election like a year after, 1998. And he lost the election because he tried to take the Confederate battle flag down off the dome during his first term in office.
Okay.
And so he lost the election. Jim Hodges, a Democrat, came in and he won the election. And so I thought, I'm going to go volunteer my time for this cause, because the Confederate battle flag to me shouldn't be upon a government building or in the House and Senate chambers as a non-sovereign flag. I mean, because they had the United States flag, they had the South Carolina flag, and then the Confederate battle flag. So I thought there's no reason to have a non-sovereign flag, and especially the Confederate battle flag up there. So I go out to volunteer my time, and I go to the NAACP. I went there 4 times saying, I would like to help with this. Never called me back. I'd like to help with this.
Or were you an active member at the time?
No.
Okay. You just wanted to get them involved.
Yeah,
okay.
I just wanted to help.
Yeah.
And so then I went to a couple of other places, and I thought, well, what's going on? And then I went and again one more time, and the head of the NAACP at that time was Dwight James, and he said, well, there's nothing happening right now. I thought, well, how can there be nothing happening when this whole election was over the Confederate battle flag? And so then I started doing some research and went to the library, and I talked to, at that time, a lot of people in Utah may not understand this, but in some southern states there's black media. You have black newspaper, you have black radio, and so there was a black newspaper. So I go in and talk to the owners of this black newspaper and say, hey, what's going on here? Can you give me some information on the background here? I've been trying to help with this. And so then I found out a little bit of history from them, and then I went to the library and did some research. But the flag went up in the House in 1939. No fanfare, but the only thing I could connect it with is there was an anti-lynching bill at the federal government that they were upset about. Went up in the Senate in 1956 in direct opposition to Brown versus Board of Education. Georgia changed their state flag in 1956 to incorporate the Confederate battle flag. And then it went up on the Dome in 1961 in direct opposition to the Civil Rights Movement, but then they said it was because it was the 100th anniversary of the Civil War. I thought, oh, why would you celebrate that?
Yeah.
So anyway, here I am. It's something now I wanted to contribute my effort to, but there's nobody working on it. So I go to the AME Church. Bishop John Hurst Adams at the time was the bishop of the AME Church there. And I said, hey, I'd like to help on this. I've been going to the NAACP. I've been doing this. He goes, so he does some research to find out why isn't something going on. Well, he finds out that Jim Hodges made a deal with the NAACP that they wouldn't bring it up his first term in office. And made a deal with a few black legislators that they wouldn't bring it up. He also made a deal with the CCC and other pro-flag groups that he wasn't going to touch the Confederate flag. So he was playing both sides of this. So I started
politics.
I started an organization called Two Flags in 2000, and I was told the flags wouldn't come down. We brought together Democrats, Republicans, the business community, religious community, even had Bob Jones University on board with us. And then all of a sudden, the NAACP is like, whoa, this is our cause. So they joined in, and we had, it's called King Day at the Dome. We had a rally that we set up. It was the first one. This will be the 20th year anniversary of King Day at the Dome. And anyway, we had 80,000 people. They guessed anywhere from 60 to 80,000 people, but the flag came down.
Nice.
The flag came out of the House and Senate chambers, and it came off the dome. They made a bad compromise, and they put it on the Confederate monument. And that's what the issue was about 5 years ago.
I got a question.
Okay.
So what motivated a white Trump supporter lady to want to What was your motivation in wanting to fight against the Confederate flag?
I thought it was wrong.
And, based on what?
Yeah.
Based on what? On what reasons? I want to learn.
Okay. Well, first you framed it around white Trump supporter.
Yeah.
As if that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm just being honest.
Yeah, but in the
Okay.
reality is I couldn't understand, because I see the Republican Party as the home of Abraham Lincoln. It was the party that blacks were in Reconstruction.
Until that party made that ideological switch.
But it wasn't. I mean, it's more It's more to that switch than people like to understand it is. Republicans voted in higher percentage for the Civil Rights Act, for the Voting Rights Act. It wasn't a big switch. There was a couple of people in the Republican Party that made some overtures that are considered, dog whistles or what, Nixon, in appealing to the Southern Democrats. There was a big switch.
The Dixiecrats.
The Dixiecrats. Well, what happened at that time, before the Voting Rights Act, is you only had one party. You had the Democratic Party. The Republican Party was not a very strong party at the time, because everybody was voting Democrat. So after that, then you did have some people switch over to the Republican Party. However, I want to say something about my fight in South Carolina. The president at the time was Bill Clinton, and not Joe Biden, Bill Clinton and Al Gore. We begged them to get on board. Not anything. They didn't help us at all. We even, the NAACP filed for an economic boycott. I'm like, whoa, and I call them up and I say, why are you doing this? These companies are on board with us, BMW and Michelin and the big companies in South Carolina. So then they called off the economic boycott. Then they did a tourism boycott, which I thought, okay. And so the Democrats were scheduled to meet in Charleston, and we wanted them to cancel, and they didn't do it. So, and we had people who knew them directly, and we could never get them on board. So I'm saying this because a lot of times things are framed that Republicans are this way and Democrats are this way. In South Carolina, 60% of the Democrats are black. Yet, they had not put a black on a statewide ticket ever. 60%. Matter of fact, Dick Harpootlian was the Democratic chair at the time, and one of the guys that I went out and found, I actually found him because he was in the news. His name's Hemphill Pride. And he was in the news upset because no blacks were on the statewide tickets. And Dick Harpootlian said, if blacks don't like the complexion of this campaign, they can keep their butts at home and they'll get what they deserve. That was the type of mentality the Democratic Party to blacks, who made up the largest part of the Democratic Party. When I took blacks out of the Democrats and just looked at whites who supported the flag that were Democrats and whites who supported the flag that were Republicans, it was exactly the same percentage. So the media can twist this around all they want, but I know, I worked with it. I understand what the dynamics were.
So do you feel the flag's racist, or?
Oh, the flag's definitely racist.
What makes it racist? Because I want you to educate other people who support, displaying it everywhere and stuff like that.
Well, there's a couple of things, but you have to, history is muddied up. Like the war in Iraq, or the war, when we did things, was it really because we were over there saving Kuwait, or was it oil?
Maybe a little of both.
Okay. So
I fought in that war, by the way.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. So sometimes the soldiers fighting are sold one bill of goods, but the reality of why we're fighting is a whole different set. So sometimes we want to throw the Civil War into this black and white issue, into this. It was no doubt over slavery, 100% over slavery. But the average soldier who gave their life in the Confederacy was not fighting for slavery. They didn't own slaves, they were poor. And so their heritage, now I'm not saying there wasn't racism involved and other things, the dynamics I don't understand. What I'm saying is their heritage is they go back and say, my grandfather, my great-grandfather didn't fight for slavery. They were fighting for states' rights. They were fighting because they came from an oppressive European country. And they came here and they didn't want that same oppressive country here. Now, I'm not saying that's one.
If that's what makes them sleep better at night, that narrative works for them, hey.
Well, I know because I've talked to them. And so it gets muddy. Now, the war was over slavery. But I'm just talking about what the soldier fights for and what the cause is. It's sometimes different. So I think we have to give people at least a little latitude in that and understanding that we don't always understand what what people's motivations
Well,
are.
the cause of division is misunderstanding.
Exactly. So going to that, a lot of people felt that flag had been up because it went up so quietly in the House and Senate chambers and on the Dome. Most people really felt that flag had been flying since the Civil War.
Oh, wow.
Mississippi's had been. Mississippi incorporated their flag after the Civil War. But most South Carolinians really felt the flags had been up there since the Civil War. So it was education. And once I gave people the education, and even the sons and daughters of the Confederacy, when this was happening, said, please don't use the flag that way. And they didn't want the flag being disgraced in that way. The flag was used for hatred. Now, I'm not going to get into what the flag was prior to that, but the flags going up in South Carolina in the House and Senate chambers and on the Dome were racist and hateful.
Thank you for that answer.
They were used for tormenting and causing grief and pain to a lot of people.
Okay.
And but again, once I educated people and told them, when something's been up your whole generation or 2 generations, people don't know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's why communication is important.
Yes.
But again, the assumption of white Trump supporter.
Yeah, and it's there.
Yeah.
You can't escape
And
it.
it's there because the way the media frames things. I work with a lot of incredible people. I mentioned some attorneys that I work with that do awesome things on prison reform. They're Republican. Mike Lee on the prison reform. He was the biggest sponsor and the one that pushed that through. So oftentimes the way things are framed.
Well, I don't only think that it's the media spinning this narrative of white Trump woman, because you got the so-called Karens now that are popping up on social media, calling the police on black people, making up stories, saying their lives are in danger. We're seeing it all the time with the barbecue
That was
Beckys.
a liberal woman. That was a Democrat.
Exactly, yeah, a privileged white woman.
Okay, yeah, but that was not a Trump supporting white
No,
woman.
but it was still a privileged white woman, and she was wanting to use her privilege to put that man in danger.
Well, you know what else? Because you brought up fear at the very beginning.
Yeah,
And for whatever reason, that woman had fear.
yeah.
It wasn't good. I mean, I'm not justifying
I don't
it.
think she was scared.
You don't think she was scared?
No, I think she
was just pissed
she
off?
didn't like that the Negro told her that she had to put the dog on the leash.
I'll give you that.
And she
Okay.
wanted to say, you know what, Negro, no, I got you.
I couldn't tell, watching it, I couldn't tell if it was fear, but you're probably right. She was just ticked off that somebody was telling her, somebody that she felt like didn't have the right to tell her.
Correct.
Okay, I'll go with you on that. But she was not a white Trump supporting woman.
No, she was not. No, she was not. And there's probably common ground we can find on some of that. There's people on social media that want to defend these far hard right positions, and a lot of them are trolls with fake profiles. And I'm not saying they don't exist in leftist circles or anything like that, right? But the moment you say, well, let's go sit at a table together and let's talk this out, they don't respond anymore, And so I gotta respect this woman here sitting next to me who's very controversial in this town, who's on the totally opposite side of the spectrum to me, to just come together today and say, hey, Malik, let's sit down and let's try to figure out ways we can understand each other and come up with solutions to certain things. I'm sure we're not going to fix anything overnight, right? However, if it makes a difference in one person's life, it's worth it.
So, okay, we just covered a lot of ground just now, but I would like to know what you feel would be a solution to help bring people together and that can help move us forward in our nation right now.
Well, that's a very difficult and philosophical question to answer, right? But I'll have a stab at it. The first thing we need to do is continue to have dialogue with each other. There's a lot of echo chambers, I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I'm part of them. But I also allow myself to be able to be open to other people's ideas and perspectives, although I might disagree with them. I'm sure you and I disagree on many levels on different things, but I'm sure we've proven tonight that we have common ground as well on many issues. So I think the dialogue is extremely important, understanding each other. I learned something about you tonight that I didn't know you defended, fought against the Confederate flag. That gives me a whole different perspective on what I read about your heard about your restaurant on the news. I think from there we need to unite, okay? Not ideologically, but just as people, as humans. We need to look at each other as, people, not as Republican, not as Democrat. We do have to recognize our diversity and respect our diversity as well. But we shouldn't let parties and ideologies keep us from being united. We should use those as ways to show our differences, because there's going to always be differences. We're never going to all think the same.
Totally agree on that. After this experience I had in South Carolina, it was very hard on my family. It was very hard on my marriage, because it took a lot. And you know this because you've been doing these rallies. You know how much it takes out of you.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a few years back of not doing anything, but then I thought, what could I do to contribute to making our society better?
Mm-hmm.
And you may not agree with what my solution is, but my solution has been the Republican Party needs real significant reach out to Black Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the last 18 years, I have petitioned and worked with my party in different areas saying, this is important. We've got to, blacks want another alternative politically, and they do, because the Democratic Party is
Well, I
truly
think we can't paint blacks with a broad brush.
No,
There's a
okay,
lot of different.
There's some in the black community that would like another alternative.
Yeah.
But unless the Republicans do more to give blacks, saying, one, just inviting, and I have to, I know you may or may not like Trump. I don't think you do, but but at least Trump has put together an initiative on putting blacks in, reaching out to different black communities, saying, we want your vote. Regardless of how you feel about him, he's one of the first that have made a big effort and has put money into this.
I don't know, because I can't speak to that. I don't know if that's correct.
Well, I know
okay.
he has.
Okay.
And so for that part is one of the reasons I support him, because this is my life passion, is because right now blacks vote 10% Republican, 90% Democrat. Latinos are a little bit different. It's like a 45 to 55 oftentimes.
Well, we're able to assimilate easier into white and conservative culture.
Well, and there's a lot of reasons, belief systems and other things, but in the Latino vote, because it's growing, there's a real competition of saying, from the parties.
Yeah.
But the Democrats have taken the black vote for granted, and the Republicans haven't actively asked for it.
See, in my view, it's ever since Clinton made that 3 strikes rule that started it. Okay.
That was a big one.
However, since Clinton, we've had both Bushes, we've had Obama,
one Bush,
and we've had Trump. That's right. We had Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, right? None of them have done anything about police reform, okay? Incarceration rates have gone up while all of them were in office. Police shootings continue to go up while all of them are. So I don't think at this point people of color really trust either side too much. They've been fighting for our votes forever, but they haven't fought for our rights. I mean, well, they don't do what they say is on paper, right? And I think that's the problem. It's got to be. They got to stop saying, "Hey," Trump says, "What do you got to lose?" That's not enough to get the black vote, and it's not enough that the Democrats aren't doing anything. That's why I don't speak for either party. I'm a registered independent at this time now.
No, and I agree with you on that. But one of the things, in addition to, is you get people together. And when you have people together, if one, it would empower the black vote to be fluid. I'm not even saying Republican, just to be fluid in that vote. 30% swing in the black vote changes elections, because that's 4%. They're 13% of the population. A 30% swing, a vote, just one election cycle changes elections. That empowers the black vote. It shows if we do something together, and one side or the other can't count on it, we can change elections.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What is it that the Republican Party can do for blacks today that they've been neglecting to do for hundreds of years?
Well, not hundreds of years.
Well, okay, let's take
Yeah.
it back a little bit
Yeah, 40
forward.
years.
40 years.
40
Let's
years.
go back 40 years.
Okay, 40
okay,
years.
why are they in a worse condition now than they were 40 years ago when Democrats and Republicans have both been in office?
Where do you see the least amount of hope for Black Americans? In what states, in what cities?
It's your more urban, larger cities.
So if you look at everywhere where the least amount of hope is, it's in Democratic governor states, Democratic cities. Van Jones even mentioned, I told you another quote.
I don't know.
Okay.
I can't say I agree with you to that
well-
because I don't know if that's. I haven't done my research on that.
Next time we get together, we can talk about that.
Okay.
If you look at all the cities that are on fire right now, they're all Democratic-controlled cities and states,
Every one of them,
every one of them. So,
to include Utah.
well, Utah was minor, but that was Democratic.
Utah wasn't minor. That was going on for a couple of days. Fires all over Salt Lake
That was a
City.
Democratic mayor of that city. Yes.
It's in a Republican state.
It's a Republican state, Democratic city. But regardless on that, I'm just saying where the hope is, the least amount of hope is in these Democratic-controlled cities with Democratic-controlled mayors, city councils, police chiefs, governors. Van Jones made the comment, it was about a year ago with the First Step Act. He said more Republican governors have made better prison reforms in their states than the Democrats have. And so
But Van Jones doesn't speak for all Black
no,
people.
he doesn't. But he also is aware of what changes are being made, and I'm aware of what changes have been made. Republicans have made a big effort on prison reform, and they're open. And the more people rub shoulders together and get to know each other's problems and find solutions together, and that's why it's important that you have blacks in the Republican Party, is so people can get to know each other and understand each other and find solutions
I
together.
think they can do that without having to join the Republican Party.
They don't have to join. I'm just saying vote.
Yeah.
If their vote is fluid and the Republicans think, hey, we have a chance at this, we need to get to know.
And what are they going to finally give Black people if they join?
Well, what is the Democratic
Or why
Party?
do they have to join to get something from Republicans?
I think it's part. No, they haven't. I mean, right now there was 8%. 8% voted for Donald Trump.
Okay.
Yet he's done historic black colleges, put more money into them. He's done a lot on opportunity zones. A lot of money into opportunity zones. A lot of money going into helping black entrepreneurs.
Is he the first one who's ever done this?
To the amount that he's put into it, yes. Not the first
Is
one.
that fact?
Yeah, it's facts. He's done more in that area. And then prison reform, Democrats held the House, the Senate, and the presidency for 2 years, did zero on prison reform to correct the 1994 prison law. So it started with Alice Johnson, and then it kind of went from there with
So
Jared Kushner.
with all this
So, yeah.
prison reform that's been done, why is it still broken?
Well, things don't get fixed overnight.
Well, when are they going to get fixed? When
Well,
when are the Republicans going to fix it?
Well, it's not just Republicans. Democrats, that was a
Yeah.
1994 bill. That was Democrat.
Yeah. I'm just trying to make
Yeah.
the point.
No.
Neither parties really has a vested
No.
interest in Black people or Black communities or Black
I
lives.
would disagree with that. I think there's many people, I'm not saying party, there's many good people.
Because at the end of the day, they're for corporations, they're for big money, they're for their donors, they're not for the working class, both parties.
I would agree. I'm talking about individual people, and I know many good Republicans, conservatives, that want to make changes and help specifically in judicial reform to help people. And they see the injustices there. I mean, we could talk about other reforms,
Yeah.
and one of the things that I think has given hope of the American dream. I want to just say one thing. I know we're kind of going over.
Yeah, we are. I'm having fun though, you guys. I swear, we're like I said, we're on two total different sides here, but, I might think about going to her restaurant. I might think about it.
Oh, you would love it. Rush Limbaugh had the Breakfast Club on yesterday. Did you hear that? Did you hear it on his show?
No, I didn't.
So, to me, and I don't want to get emotional here because this has been a long journey for me.
Yeah.
And it's been met with a lot of frustration because I haven't got the reception from Republicans on the leadership level I would have liked to have gotten on this reach out. So knowing that Rush Limbaugh contacted the Breakfast Club and said, hey, I've been wanting to do this for a long time and I haven't done it, and this is the time to do it. Let's talk. it's a first step.
Yeah.
But there's efforts being made. There's awareness there.
Yeah.
And even though maybe some haven't reached out, it's not because I think sometimes we're afraid to cross the line, to have that dialogue. I mean, it's just like Kevin was mentioning that he filmed one of your protests and he got just slammed for it. And so sometimes people hold back on having dialogue with people who are perceived to be on the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
But things are starting to happen.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of really good Republicans that want change. Now, maybe we're not all in the leadership position or things of that nature. So I think you're right on where people's priorities lie
Yeah.
on as far as corporations and stuff. But I'm talking about the ground level
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So,
Me too.
So anyway, I was thrilled to hear about that, but
Yeah.
but I'm heartbroken on what's going on
Yeah.
in these cities, because these
Yeah.
cities are the cities that have the least amount of hope. Now their neighborhood grocery stores, their neighborhood drug stores, even their low-income housing are destroyed. I mean, and people that are dependent upon something being close by, and it's going to be hard to rebuild. So I mean, this whole thing breaks my heart on multiple levels, but I see some hope coming out of it, just like I said with the Rush Limbaugh and the Breakfast Club. So I think we're going to start
I
communicating.
think, yeah, I'm going to think we'll start communicating too. Now, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Would you consider, because we were talking about your banner yesterday at your restaurant, and some people had called me during that time to say, hey, let's go protest this, Malik. And I was like, well, no, I don't want to protest this because, it's her right to believe and say and display her speech however she wants. We don't want to be silenced. We're not going to silence anybody else. But I feel that the sign doesn't make everybody feel invited. It doesn't. I don't think it makes certain people of the community of color feel safe, even though I'm sure it does. I'm sure it is safe there. I'm sure it's like the safest
When I have
place.
a lot of people of color in my restaurant.
And,
so.
and it's good food, right? People of color, we love good food, right? Just like everybody else. But I think it's a little bit disinviting, I think if we're talking about unity and coming together and building, why not next to your Trump banner, put a Black Lives Matter banner, and I could invite everybody from the chapter to your restaurant to eat.
I would put a Black Lives Matter banner up. I won't take my Trump banner down.
No, I'm not. I would never ask you to sacrifice one for the other. Say, why don't we start the healing by doing something like that? I got the sign.
I may even create my own sign on George, because this is about, and I think we got to be careful not to lose this family with everything that's going on.
Yeah.
This is about George Floyd.
Yeah.
And so I would love to put a sign up saying that we support George Floyd and his family.
Okay, yeah.
And so we'll create one together, but that...
Now, would you put a little hashtag Black Lives Matter on the bottom?
I will.
Okay, all right. Hey, that sounds fair.
All right. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. Thank you, everybody. And Ogden, let's stay in the fight for police reform. Mayor Caldwell, you're going to be hearing from me.